We are here today with Kenny Foster. His album is Somewhere in Middle America. Where in Middle America are you right about now?
Man, right now I am in Joplin, Missouri, just south over at my parents' place. We've got a little piece of land, and we had Thanksgiving, and I just stayed over because the year's winding down for me.
So, is that where you grew up?
It is, yeah, yeah. Born and raised. I think I was. My family's been in this area since the Civil War, so several generations. I get it honest.
The song we just heard is called Poor Kids, and even though I would not describe my later childhood years as poor kids, it did remind me a little bit of my early childhood growing up.
Sure.
Um, Tell me about growing up with the hand-me-downs and the imagination taking center stage.
Yeah, man. I think the thing that I love about the Midwest and my particularly analog childhood um, is that it was kind of magical. It was more magical. You didn't know what you were up against, I guess, if that makes sense. So you're just sort of creating, and the joy all exists between the ears. It wasn't that I ever disdained any of those things. You kind of make it work for you. If anything, I think it made me develop a bit more of a character, if that makes sense. So I didn't have flashy things to win friends. Like you just had to win them by being a decent person. Like, not to say that people that have flashy things aren't decent people. I just mean, like, I had to go an extra mile, to make those friends and find those people. And honestly, most of my friends lived, within a couple blocks of me at that point in time. So um, I really enjoyed it. I thought it set me up for a lot later in life.
Absolutely. I would say that when I was young, I really had to rely on imagination. And as I got older and as the video games came in and all that stuff,
Sure.
I wouldn't say I lost I wouldn't say I lost the capability to be imaginative, but I certainly lost the need to do it 24/7.
Sure. Well, it's a muscle, like anything, right? Like language, like anything. If you stop using it, it atrophies. Um, And I think that's what I like about music, that there are no pictures, and I know that that puts it kinda down the pecking order, especially with media and bandwidth as we have it now, but I still think it's super important to draw pictures in people's minds with music. Like, it's a powerful tool and can be more powerful because they're an active participant in it. We're not just showing them everything.
Oh yeah, I don't think I would be hosting a show like this if I didn't grow up using the library as a primary source of entertainment.
I
And
love that, man. The DVDs. Gotta get those DVDs,
forget the
VHS.
DVDs. When I was young, I read books all the time. I
Oh,
don't
yes.
know if my eyes could handle all the book reading that I did.
That's
Well,
well
my eyes today could not handle all the book reading I did when I was younger.
What were your favorites?
Oh, I loved like mysteries, like
Sure.
kid mysteries,
Uh-huh.
the Nancy Drew type of stuff, Hardy
Hardy
Boy.
Boys,
Um, there were some other more modern series that I read, but I love that kind of thing. I
sure.
And these days I don't exactly read too much more than the news, but I I get my literary fix from albums like this.
Oh, cool, man. I love that. That's great.
What are you into these days?
Man, I'll be honest, during the pandemic, I finished my favorite author at the moment is Haruki Murakami. I just like the way he writes. It's very esoteric and um, there's always a bit of supernatural involved, but it's all very mundane at the same time, and I love the way that he plays with those motifs together, and someone's always very lonely and go on this sort of reluctant adventure, and I don't know, I love most of what he does, and so I finished everything that he has in the world during the pandemic, so I'm on the prowl if you've got any ideas.
Well, you see yourself in that, going on a reluctant adventure, having to tour your music.
Man, the only reluctance was just leaving home. Um, I I I adore home. I love coming back as often as I can. Love my family. I had a really great upbringing. I know that's not everyone's story, but I'm grateful for the roots that it provided. But also, my father always said that he wanted to provide wings as well, so that his kids could feel free to go off knowing who they were and that they had a place that they belonged as well. Um, so I was only reluctant to leave that because it was a sweet, soft nest. But my wife has this saying that she grew up with, that eventually the bird weighs itself down too much and the straw and the accoutrement in the nest starts poking it and it makes it uncomfortable. And I think that's just what ended up happening for me. There are some people that were perfectly content to stay behind and found what they loved early, and I'm almost jealous of that, that they were perfectly content in that life and continue to be, and I think that's beautiful. I just was too restless. I think I had a vagabond heart from the beginning, and we traveled a lot as a family, mostly camping, national parks, that sort of thing, but, um, yeah, I got to see a lot, in my youth before I left house, and I think I just realized that there was so much more out there that needed exploring, and I think that's me.
Yeah, let's talk about my favorite from the album, Copy Paste Repeat,
Yeah, man.
because being from this small town, the upbringing, we will definitely talk more about that later, but growing older in a small town is, I think, significantly more difficult than growing up in a small town, because
Sure. That's a great distinction.
once you find out that you want either a little more than the town can offer or you don't quite fit in, then comes that tricky part where you have to decide, do I stay or do I take off? And for you, you know, wanting to do music, that was the thing that made you different. That was the thing that made it that you couldn't stay. So, what did it feel like knowing you had to take off?
Um, it's a great question. I feel like I was mostly just spurned on by excitement at the beginning, of knowing what might be. And to be honest, because I made that decision young enough, that's why I appreciate your distinction between growing up and growing old, because I was young enough that I was still naive to what might happen negatively. I just wasn't even thinking about it, wasn't even worried about it. And so leaving, as difficult as it was, held little bits of excitement in each one. I traveled well enough to realize that some places are strikingly similar, but like delightfully different, is how I describe a lot of travel. And so everywhere that I went to sort of felt like that. And Nashville felt like home, but it was also the South. So it was very different. And I realized very quickly that I was not from the South. Um, but I think if you dug deep enough, there were a lot of similarities with, you know, uh, family, figuring out how, like Southern wisdom. I think there's a hillbilly wisdom too. It's this idea that things can be learned by watching others, listening to others, reading, telling stories. And I was excited about that. I think, but I think leaving, anybody that ends up leaving their hometown, whether it's for music or career or just for something different, like that's a pretty big undertaking, and it can't be overstated just because it's become so normal. in modern life. Like we're chasing jobs, we're going off to school. We are, people are traversing the country on the regular, and it hasn't been long that we societally have been doing that. We stayed locked in on purpose. Most of the time, I think that's the thing about copy paste repeat was sort of nagging at that bit where sometimes people stay where they are because they feel like they should, and there's this sort of, I don't even think they entertain the idea that they could leave. And that had a bit of heartbreak in it for me, and that I wanted to capture. And I also think that sometimes people leave because they think it's the thing that they should do, because they've always been spurned towards that, and maybe they wanted to stay. And so I think taking on both of those ideas at the same time at least drudged up enough emotional energy for me to, I think, um, get it right. I wrote it with a friend of mine who grew up all over, but moved very young to Nashville, I think 12 or 13. And so she had the same sort of ideas about growing up and leaving reluctantly, and trying to figure out, but also knowing all of her friends back home, they're still there. And it's this push and pull that I think is happening on a grand scale. We're seeing it play out in amalgams of ways, both in our, social, cultural, and political landscape. I think there's just this tension that has always existed, and I think I don't know, I was trying to wrestle with that in this record, and
Yeah, I think for me, I I don't imagine myself wanting a traditional find a wife, settle down, start a family, start a life. I don't know, I'm someone who lives so deeply in my own head that the appeal of becoming more connected to another person, just I don't know, it's not there for me.
mm, yeah,
So when I hear copy paste repeat, I hear a song that says, "Hey man, it's good." It's good that you don't want to become identical to how your parents were. And oh, don't get me wrong, I'm not leaving where I live. But
sure, man. Well, but it's a journey of the mind, isn't it? I mean, I think, like I said, I think the joys between the ears, it just, um, I've got a friend of mine who says that the inner battle is the only battle. And I think, borrowing from this movie that I watched, it was by the writer of the Back to the Future trilogy. He never really got anything um, made into a film after that. So everybody towards the end of his life kind of like got together and made this movie called Interstate 60, and it went straight to DVD. I don't know if you've ever seen it, and it's it's got Gary Oldman in it. I mean, like I don't know how he wrote some of these folks, but it's very campy and a little cheesy, and you kind of have to get over the hump of how it's sort of shot storybook wise, and kind of cheaply. But there was this moment where Gary Oldman's character says, the problem with modern man right now is that there is no frontier anymore. All everything that we know of has been discovered, and you used to be able to just hitch up to a wagon and go and find and or create and or like cleave a life that you wanted out of the rock or the land or the soil or whatever, and that was available to anyone that had the chutzpah to do it. But now space is really the only frontier, and only billionaires are getting there now. And so it's just there is no frontier for mankind, and I think the only way to go in, especially if you grew up, in lower class, working class, middle class, if you're anywhere in the in between, non-billionaire, which is most of us, that's the frontier that we need to be exploring, because I think it's the only way forward, personally. But so location matters so much less, and I think that's what I'm discovering as I grow older. And location matters less, but how you treat the things that you do. And I think the sort of forced run uppance with things that are different and other for me. I do a lot of international touring as well. It just uh, that's important. It is stretching me. It is stretching my internal world to be more accepting, more loving, more understanding. Sometimes when I have terrible ideas, it closes off part of myself, and I have to figure out, is that because I need to be wary, or is that because I was raised in a particular way? And like that, those questions are I think constant, and it's important to like help each other out when we when we come to a conclusion that we think is pretty good. It's like enumerate that in some way, write a blog, do a show, write a song, or paint a picture, do a sculpture, whatever it is, to express to others, a, you're not alone, b, I think I figured this out, and if you're with me, then maybe we can just start here as a basis and launch forward further. How do we progress? How do we get further from where we are? Because I think it's there's only further joy, more understanding breeds joy, contentment down the road, and I think this is my small contribution, is through music, trying to say, hey, I think this is right, and if you're with me, then maybe we can figure some stuff out together from here.
Yeah, learning that you don't have to fit the mold, I think, is, what made copy paste repeat appeal to me, and just it's a beautiful notion.
Hmm,
Let's hear that song, and we will be right back.
great.